What started as a routine morning inside a small Alabama courtroom would soon unravel decades of hidden injustice. A respected deputy chief, a powerful judge, and a single late arrival collided in a confrontation no one saw coming. Secrets buried beneath polite courtrooms and silent records were dragged into the light, exposing bias so blatant it could no longer be ignored. One woman's quiet defiance would send shockwaves through an entire system, forcing those in power to face uncomfortable truths. The morning sun was just beginning to rise over the Birmingham skyline when Gloria Roberts' alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m. Gloria, 54, had spent over 3 decades working her way up from a beat cop to deputy chief of the Birmingham Police Department. Over the years, she had become known for her steady leadership, her sharp legal mind, and her ability to stay calm under pressure, qualities that earned her both respect and resentment in equal measure. Her modest but tastefully decorated home in a quiet Birmingham neighborhood reflected her disciplined nature. Every framed award and commendation told the story of a woman who had served her community with both pride and grit, even when the system she served didn't always value her the same way. On this particular Monday, Gloria wasn't heading to her usual command post at headquarters. Instead, she had to take care of a personal matter, a red light ticket she knew had been wrongly issued. The municipal court hearing was set for 9 a.m., and she planned to handle it quickly before starting her regular workday. Gloria chose not to wear her uniform that morning, opting instead for a simple black sweater and tailored slacks. She left her badge and duty belt on the dresser. No need to make a scene over a traffic ticket. After all, she knew how people, even judges, could react when a black woman in authority walked into a room. It wasn't new to her, it was just part of life. At 7:30 a.m., while pouring her second cup of coffee, her phone buzzed. A carjacking had been reported near a local elementary school, the kind of call that still made her stomach clench after all these years. Without hesitation, Gloria shifted into command mode, coordinating her officers, reviewing surveillance footage, and working with dispatch to protect the kids in the area. By the time the immediate threat was under control, it was already 8:40 a.m. She knew she'd be cutting it close to make it to court on time, but public safety always came first. As she drove downtown, she could already picture the courtroom: wood-paneled walls, uncomfortable benches, and Judge Stanley Whitaker presiding. She had never appeared before him personally, but his reputation was well known. Whitaker, a white judge in his late 60s, was known for running a tight ship and showing little patience, especially for defendants of color. Gloria pulled into the municipal court parking lot at exactly 9:15 a.m., stepping out of her car with the calm, no-nonsense confidence that had carried her through decades of policing. She wasn't worried about the ticket itself. What she didn't know was that the next 30 minutes would do more than challenge her patience. They would expose the deep cracks in the system she'd spent her whole career defending. And this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. The air inside Birmingham Municipal Court was stale, a mix of disinfectant, old wood, and nerves. The room had already started filling up when Gloria Roberts stepped through the door at 9:15 a.m., her heels tapping sharply against the marble floor. She moved with purpose, her posture straight, her expression calm. Years of commanding rooms full of officers, and occasionally rooms full of suspects, had trained her to hold her ground, even when her stomach churned with frustration. Judge Stanley Whitaker was already on the bench, perched in his high-backed chair, like a king surveying his kingdom. At 68, with thinning white hair and a permanent scowl, Whitaker was a fixture in Birmingham's legal system. He prided himself on running a by-the-book courtroom, though whose book he was using had always been up for debate. Defense attorneys quietly joked that his courtroom had 2 sets of rules, one for white defendants and one for everyone else. Gloria took a seat near the back, hoping to slip in quietly. That hope evaporated almost instantly. "Stop right there," Judge Whitaker's voice rang out, sharp and cutting. Heads turned, eyes shifting from the judge to the woman he was calling out. Gloria's jaw tightened, but she stayed where she was. "Yes, Your Honor." Her tone was respectful, but firm. "You were scheduled for 9 a.m., Whitaker said, flipping through papers with exaggerated impatience. "Apparently, you think this court should wait on your convenience." Several white defendants, who had been just as late, some even later, glanced down at their hands. None of them had been called out. None of them had even been noticed. The bailiff, Hector Cruz, shifted uncomfortably by the door. He'd seen this before. "I apologize for being late, Your Honor," Gloria said evenly. "I was responding to a police emergency." "I don't want excuses," Whitaker snapped. "If everyone had a personal emergency, this court would never get anything done." Gloria's fingers curled into her palm. She had faced down violent suspects, hostile crowds, and corrupt officers in her 30 years on the force. But there was something particularly infuriating about being publicly humiliated over something so minor, in a room where everyone knew exactly why she was being treated this way. Whitaker's voice grew louder, meant for the entire room to hear. "This courtroom is not a suggestion. You don't walk in when you feel like it. This isn't the corner store." Gloria caught Hector's eye for just a moment. The unspoken message between them was clear. This was about more than a parking ticket. This was about control, about putting a black woman in her place, no matter who she was. "Since punctuality seems to be such a challenge for you," Whitaker continued, "I'm fining you $750 for contempt." There was a rustle through the courtroom, subtle but undeniable. People were paying attention now. Gloria glanced at the clerk's desk, where Marianne Lewis, a court clerk with a face etched by years of silence, was typing the fine into the system with a slight tremble in her fingers. It wasn't the first time she'd seen this, but something about today felt different. Gloria drew in a slow breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Anger was easy. Anger was a trap. She had learned long ago that her power didn't come from matching a man like Whitaker's volume. It came from knowing how to dismantle his authority, brick by brick. "Understood, Your Honor," Gloria said, her voice so steady it cut through the tension like a knife. "If the court will allow, I'd like to present some context for my delay." Whitaker waved a dismissive hand. "Context isn't necessary. You were late. That's all I need to know." That was the moment Gloria knew this wasn't going to be just a routine morning. She had planned to quietly contest a traffic ticket, go back to work, and forget all about it. But now, standing in front of a judge whose smugness practically radiated off the bench, she realized this was no longer about her. This was about every black woman who had been cut off, every person of color who had been lectured instead of heard, every defendant who had been fined into submission, while their white counterparts were given a free pass. Gloria wasn't just here for herself anymore. She stood taller, her professional calm masking the fire burning in her chest. Whitaker might have had the power of the gavel, but Gloria Roberts knew the power of documentation, of facts, and of exposing the truth in plain sight. This wasn't over. Not even close. As the morning sun filtered through the high windows, highlighting the polished wood and dusty corners of a courtroom too accustomed to injustice, Gloria silently vowed. If the system wanted a fight, they were about to get one. For a brief moment, the only sound in the courtroom was the faint clatter of the clerk's keyboard and the distant hum of traffic outside. Gloria Roberts stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on Judge Whitaker's. She could feel every set of eyes in the room on her, some curious, some uncomfortable, and some, like Hector Cruz's, quietly hopeful. She had been in tighter spots than this, but there was something about standing in a room full of people, being talked down to like she was a child, that made the fire in her chest burn just a little hotter. There was a time when she might have swallowed it, but not today. Not after everything she had seen. Not after everything she had built. With the deliberate calm of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, Gloria reached into her bag and pulled out a black leather wallet. Its gold emblem caught the light, gleaming under the fluorescent bulbs. The room felt quieter. Slowly, she flipped it open and held it up, making sure everyone, including Judge Whitaker, could see the Birmingham Police Department Deputy Chief's badge. "My name," she said, her voice steady, "is Gloria Roberts. Deputy Chief, Birmingham Police Department." The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Whitaker's face froze. Whatever color had been left in his cheeks drained away. The arrogance, the easy confidence of a man who had spent decades ruling from his bench without consequence, flickered for just a second. "I was responding to a police emergency this morning," Gloria continued, still holding up her badge. "A child was nearly abducted in a carjacking near Lincoln Elementary. That's why I was late. Not that you gave me the chance to explain." There was no anger in her voice. Not yet. Just the hard edge of someone who was done asking for basic respect. Whitaker's mouth opened, then closed again. Papers shuffled on his desk. The clerk, Mary Ann Lewis, had stopped typing entirely, her fingers hovering just above the keys. "If you'd asked," Gloria said, her voice carrying through the room, "I would have gladly provided documentation. I have dispatch logs, time-stamped calls, and officer reports." She paused. "That's what you would have asked for if I looked different, isn't it?" A ripple of tension passed through the courtroom. A few white defendants shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One young man in khakis, who'd arrived late and hadn't even been acknowledged, sank lower on the bench, his face reddening. Whitaker cleared his throat, the sound dry and brittle. "Deputy Chief Roberts, had I been aware of your position, My position shouldn't matter," Gloria cut him off, her voice firm but calm. "Whether I'm wearing this badge or not, I deserve the same respect as anyone else who walks into this courtroom." She let her badge fall closed, placing it carefully on the podium. Then she reached for her phone, unlocking it with a swipe and holding it up. "For the record," she said, "I've documented every word you've said to me. And I've also documented how you've treated every other late arrival this morning." Whitaker's knuckles whitened as he gripped his gavel. "7 other defendants arrived after 9 a.m., Gloria continued, her voice sharper now. 5 were white. None of them were fined. None of them were scolded. They were given the benefit of the doubt." She scrolled through her notes, making sure her facts were clear. 2 were Latino. They got verbal warnings. The only 2 who were fined, me and a young black man sitting 2 rows back. The young man straightened up, eyes wide with surprise that someone had noticed. "This," Gloria said, turning to face the room, "isn't about one late arrival. It's about how this courtroom, and others like it, operate under 2 different sets of rules." Hector stood a little taller by the door, the faintest hint of a smile crossing his face. Mary Ann glanced nervously at Whitaker, then back at her screen, quietly adding a personal note to her own records. Whitaker's voice wavered. "Perhaps we can discuss this in chambers." "No," Gloria said, the finality in her voice cutting him off again. "We'll discuss it here, in front of everyone, where it belongs." For the first time that morning, Whitaker wasn't the one in control. The gavel, the bench, and the title didn't shield him anymore. Because the truth, cold, clear, and undeniable, was finally out in the open. And Gloria wasn't done yet. The weight of Gloria's words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The courtroom, once a place where Judge Whitaker's voice reigned supreme, had shifted. Now, the spotlight was squarely on him, and everyone knew it. Whitaker cleared his throat again, trying to gather what was left of his authority. "Deputy Chief Roberts," he began, his voice softer now. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Gloria interrupted, her tone cool and steady. "There's a pattern." She set her phone on the podium, angling the screen toward the judge. Her notes, meticulously organized, time-stamped, and damning, were there for anyone to see. This isn't just about today. It's about how you operate this courtroom, and who pays the price for it. The rows of defendants, most of them trying to avoid eye contact just minutes earlier, now sat up straighter. For some, it was the first time they'd seen someone push back, someone who didn't flinch when confronted with power. And not just anyone. A black woman in authority, standing her ground. Marianne Lewis, the court clerk, was still frozen at her keyboard. Her fingers hovered just above the keys as her mind raced. For 12 years, she had watched moments like this play out in silence. Black defendants fined to the maximum, white ones getting gentle warnings, Latino defendants scolded like children but rarely fined, just enough to remind them where they stood. She'd documented it all in a small spiral notebook tucked at the back of her desk drawer. Now, for the first time, she wondered if it was finally time to bring it out. Gloria continued, her voice measured but unflinching. Your Honor, over the past 6 months, your contempt fines have followed a very clear pattern. Black defendants, nearly all fined. White defendants, almost none. And when you do fine them, the amounts are lower. It's not a misunderstanding. It's data. Whitaker shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his fingers tapping the armrest. This is highly inappropriate. What's inappropriate, Gloria said, her voice cutting through his, is running a courtroom where justice depends on the color of your skin. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Some of the white defendants looked down at their hands. Others glanced toward Gloria, recognizing a truth they'd been too comfortable to acknowledge before. Hector Cruz, the bailiff, stood a little taller, his chest filling with quiet pride. He'd seen too much to stay silent forever. From her seat at the clerk's desk, Marianne finally moved. Her hand reached into the drawer, pulling out the worn notebook she'd kept hidden for over a decade. Slowly she stood. Your Honor. Marianne's voice was hesitant at first, but it gained strength with each word. I have records, too, from the last 12 years. Whitaker's head snapped toward her. Mrs. Lewis, this isn't the time. It is, she said firmly. It's exactly the time. She held the notebook in both hands, the pages thick with scribbled dates, case numbers, and fines. I started keeping this because something didn't sit right with me. I couldn't prove it then, but I see it now. Gloria nodded toward her. The numbers speak for themselves. Whitaker's face flushed deep red, the gavel trembling slightly in his grip. His authority, once unquestioned, was slipping away in front of a room full of witnesses. Gloria's eyes swept across the room, landing on the young black man in the second row. The other defendant fined that morning. His shoulders were squared now, his chin a little higher. The system had tried to grind him down just like it always had, but today was different. I've already sent my preliminary documentation to the Alabama Judicial Review Commission, Gloria said, her voice clear, and to the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Whitaker's mouth opened in protest, but no words came out. This isn't about embarrassing you, Gloria added, though her tone made clear she wasn't losing sleep over it. It's about ensuring that every person, no matter their race, background, or bank account, walks into a courtroom that sees them as a citizen, not a color. The room was silent, but the air was charged. Marianne sat back down, her notebook now resting on the edge of her desk, where everyone could see it. Hector gave Gloria the smallest of nods, a silent thank you for saying what he never could. Whitaker's gavel hit the wood, but the sound rang hollow. The authority it once carried was gone. All that was left was the truth, a truth too long ignored, and now impossible to deny. Gloria wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all of them. And for the first time in Judge Whitaker's courtroom, justice wasn't just a word. It was a demand. By the time Gloria Roberts walked out of Birmingham Municipal Court that day, the air around the courthouse felt different. The usual hush, the uneasy silence that hung over rooms where power always leaned one way, was gone. In its place was something sharper, heavier. People were talking. They were whispering in hallways, texting from benches, and calling friends the moment they stepped outside. Gloria wasn't thinking about any of that yet. She drove straight to her office at the Birmingham Police Department, sat at her desk, and opened her laptop. Her hands moved with practiced calm, drafting an official complaint to the Alabama Judicial Review Commission. Attached were screenshots of her notes, photos of the courtroom log, and a timeline of her own experience that morning. She copied the email to the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division and the Alabama Bar Association. Gloria knew how the system worked. If you didn't document it immediately, it was too easy for those in power to pretend it never happened. By lunchtime, word had spread beyond the courthouse walls. A local journalist, Malik Shepard, who covered city politics and had a reputation for exposing racial bias in local government, got a tip from a clerk inside the court. An hour later, his first article went live. Deputy Chief calls out long-standing racial bias in Birmingham Municipal Court. The article included anonymous statements from court staff, a brief history of complaints against Judge Whitaker, and a summary of Gloria's statement, all without naming his source. It didn't matter. Anyone who knew how the court worked knew exactly who had finally spoken up. By mid-afternoon, the story was everywhere. Social media lit up, with hashtags like #JusticeForGloria, #Bias in Birmingham, and #Judge Whitaker Exposed, trending across Alabama. What started as whispers became a full-blown public conversation. Defendants, attorneys, even other judges began sharing their own stories. How Whitaker's temper, his selective punishments, and his dismissive treatment of Black and Latino defendants had been an open secret for years. Gloria's phone rang constantly. Calls from civil rights groups, local activists, and Black attorneys across Alabama filled her voicemail. Some had their own notes, their own receipts from cases Whitaker had handled. They had stayed silent for years, afraid of retaliation. But now, they had something powerful. A deputy chief willing to say out loud what they had only dared to whisper. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, the clerk's office was in chaos. Staff were ordered to pull records from the past 5 years of Whitaker's cases. Marianne Lewis, her spiral notebook now sitting openly on her desk, was finally asked to share it with investigators. Every fine, every reprimand, every discrepancy she had quietly noted was now evidence in an official inquiry. Even Hector Cruz, the bailiff, was called into a closed-door meeting with investigators. For years he had watched, gritting his teeth through every moment of bias he couldn't stop. This time, he told the truth. How Whitaker's tone shifted the moment a Black or Latino defendant approached the podium. How fines seemed to grow steeper based on skin color alone. How just following orders no longer felt like enough. By early evening, national news outlets picked up the story. CNN ran a segment titled, "Deputy Police Chiefs Stand Shines. Light on Systemic Bias in Local Courts." Civil rights attorneys called it a landmark moment, the first time in recent memory that a high-ranking law enforcement official publicly documented bias from the judicial side of the system. Activists called for Whitaker's immediate suspension, while legal scholars debated how deep the investigation should go. Should it stop with Whitaker, or pull in every judge in the county? Gloria sat in her office well past sunset, her inbox overflowing with emails from people she'd never met. Young public defenders thanking her for speaking up. Elderly Black residents recalling their own humiliations in Whitaker's courtroom decades earlier. And law students inspired by her courage. She didn't answer most of them. Not yet. There was too much left to do. But before heading home, she took one last look at the framed photo on her desk, her late husband, himself a former officer, smiling in his dress blues. "We knew the system was broken," Gloria whispered to the empty room. "Now they can't deny it anymore." 3 months after Gloria Roberts stood her ground in Birmingham Municipal Court, the entire landscape of local justice had shifted. Judge Whitaker resigned under public pressure, but his fall was just the beginning. Birmingham's first Judicial Accountability Task Force was created, requiring monthly reviews of all fines, sentencing disparities, and courtroom conduct. Community members, including civil rights advocates, public defenders, and retired judges, were given permanent seats at the table. Gloria's actions inspired a statewide review of municipal court records, uncovering similar racial patterns in other courtrooms. Her courage sparked training programs for judges, clerks, and bailiffs across Alabama, all aimed at dismantling bias baked into the system for generations. In her office, Gloria framed the $750 contempt fine receipt, a reminder that standing up to power comes at a cost, but silence costs far more. For Birmingham's future defendants, justice would no longer depend on skin color. Gloria Roberts' story isn't just about one judge or one courtroom. It's a reminder of how easily bias can hide in plain sight. Whether you're in a courtroom, at a doctor's office, or simply paying a bill, it's important to recognize when you're being treated unfairly and to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. Document everything, ask questions, and never assume someone else will fight for you. Today, more than ever, we need people willing to challenge injustice, no matter their age, background, or title. Whether you're 25 or 75, your voice still matters. If you believe in standing up for what's right, and you want to hear more stories that inspire, empower, and expose the truth, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Together, we can shine a light on the truth, one story at a time.